These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. Bunny Man. My dad and I went hiking a few days ago. My dad is a waterfall fanatic, and he wants to see as many as possible. So, he and I are hiking along a very pretty trail. We're hiking along a river, it's flowing nicely, there's mountains all around us. The trail is weaving around big, beautiful boulders. I'm hiking at most 30 feet ahead of him looking for a spot to stop and have a sit-down picnic lunch, and as I rounded a blind curve in the trail, I just froze. Sitting on a stump maybe 10 feet off the right side of the trail is a guy. He is wearing one of those colorful Baja hoodies with the hood pulled up and a half mask with rabbit ears. He sees me and stands up right as my dad rounds the corner. We are all three sizing each other up in silence, and my dad addresses him. "What's up, buddy?" The masked man tips his head as if he was deciding what to do with us, and then says back, "Not much. You aren't the guys I'm waiting for. Have a good day." Then he turns and jogs off quickly into the woods. Strapped on his lower back was a large hunting knife, and he had a pistol on his hip. We lost sight of him pretty quickly. We hadn't seen a soul on the trail all day, and we had been hiking for almost 3 hours. Needless to say, we left the waterfall for another day and quickly turned around. Once we were off the trail, we reported it to the local Forest Service and the police, but they said they couldn't do much aside from keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. The masked guy didn't have a backpack, or water, or anything, which makes me think he had either stashed it somewhere or was maybe camping and waiting nearby. I hate to admit it, but I desperately wanted to go after the guy and ask who he was waiting for and why. Story 2. Independence Day Discovery. I live in a small rural community in the eastern U.S. It's a nice little town. Because of my work in the medical field, I've met some interesting folks. I'm also familiar with law enforcement and emergency personnel. Small town life is not as dull and uneventful as people think, especially since everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. I have a lot of stories to share, but since this one just happened, I'll start here. Because it's still very recent and the investigation is ongoing, I have to be vague with some details, but I needed to tell someone. I'm single and live alone. Due to a stalker, I've moved twice, but that's another story for another time. However, it is relevant for this story for multiple reasons. The first reason being that I have a dog for the sake of protection as well as have motion sensors and outdoor security cameras. The second reason being the location of my home, which is literally down the street from the fire department. I can see it from my living room window, and a couple blocks from the police station. However, next to the fire department is the road department, which is basically a parking lot where they park their road equipment and empty garbage trucks at night and on weekends. Oddly, it doesn't have a security camera. Small town life, I suppose. My house sits on a hill with a good view of that side of the street. Due to the incline, the large trees in the front yard, and the half-cornfield on the property next to me, most people on the street below wouldn't notice me in the backyard unless they were actively looking. However, I can see the street clearly. This incident happened Saturday evening. The county was holding its annual Independence Day spiel with a community barbecue, music, fireworks, etc. I did not attend because it's just not my thing, plus I have a dog and the sound of fireworks could be traumatizing. Before the big show, I took the dog out to relieve herself in the backyard. There was still at least an hour of daylight, but the entire neighborhood was pretty quiet because most everyone was at the fairgrounds or various other holiday events. So when an unfamiliar, large, white pickup drove slowly down the street, I noticed. It must have turned around at the end of the street because I saw it again, moving in the opposite direction, only about 20 seconds later. This time, it turned into the parking lot of the road department. Now, people have been known to toss things into the empty garbage trucks, usually at night to avoid getting caught, because they don't want to slash or unable to make the trip to the landfill themselves. Usually, it's things like furniture or broken equipment, but I didn't see any of those things in the back of this truck. The driver was a somewhat stocky guy of average height. He took 3 large black trash bags from the bed of his truck and tossed them one by one into the hopper of the garbage truck. Then he left. Now, I swear I'm not one of those meddling rear window types who always thinks activity is suspicious and that their neighbors are up to no good, but something about this didn't sit right with me. Normally, when I see people tossing their garbage into the trucks and leaving, I don't bother reporting it because it's relatively harmless. But this time, I had a gut feeling. So I called the police. If anything, they could get the guy for illegally dumping trash from a barbecue or whatever. While I'm on the phone with dispatch, I put my dog inside to cut down on distractions while the officers investigate. A few minutes later, an officer arrived and I crossed the street to meet him, gave him a description of the events, and pointed out which of the trucks the man had tossed the bags. He found the bags. He took photos. He put on gloves and told me to stay back. The bags were tied in a knot at the top and it took him a minute to untie one because of the gloves and how tight the knot was, but eventually he got it open, looked inside for a few seconds, then twisted it closed and took a few steps back. "Shit," he hissed under his breath. "What?" I asked. "It's a body." I felt sick. I could tell he felt sick too. I saw him grow pale, his hand was trembling when he held the radio, even his voice was shaking as he gave the code to dispatch. The dispatcher sounded confused when she asked him to repeat it. Within 10 minutes, the county sheriff was on the scene. Even he looked sick at the contents of the bag. The coroner arrived about 10 minutes after that and the first officer walked me back to the house along with another one who arrived at the same time as the coroner. Though I showed the first cop via the app on my phone when I described the events initially, I now showed them the video on a larger screen. The camera caught footage of the truck as it drove by both times, as well as pulling into the parking lot, though unfortunately not a clear view of the license plate or of the man tossing the bags out of frame. We watched the footage over and over, pausing frames, the officers taking notes. Ultimately, they requested this footage as well as a copy of the files from the past week to see if the truck had been in the area before. I've also been saving footage until the road department installs their own camera this week. Because this is still fresh, I don't know many more details. I know the body was in pieces, but I don't know the age of the victim, the gender, cause of death, any of that. Information hasn't been released to the public. I don't know if the coroner has even been able to identify the body yet. A police cruiser has been parked at the fire department next door for constant surveillance in case the guy comes back. The guy who dumped the body was likely a local. How else would he know he could dump there? He probably thought it'd get buried in other people's illegal trash accumulated over the holiday weekend and the sanitation crew wouldn't have bothered to investigate. When I think about how this guy lives in my community, it makes me feel physically ill. To think that he had clearly scouted the area for a dump site, that it may not have been the first time this had happened, that this could happen again. If I hadn't called it in, if I hadn't been in the backyard at that exact moment, or if I had ignored that gut feeling, the victim would have never been found, may never find potential justice. Their loved ones may never have closure. In fact, there's a possibility that it might just happen again to another poor soul. I hope it's not me. Dear God, please don't let it be me. I think it's time I moved again. Third time's a charm, right? Story 3. I believe I may have discovered a kill room in the country hills. I used to deliver packages in the mail for a company in the south. A lot of the daily routes were in the hills and woods. Last year, I had a route that was in a super deep country. I was used to back roads and the country now at this job by this point. There's some houses I stopped at where the driveway is super steep or some other shit. But for the most part, everyone was always super friendly out there. Country folk. Well, I had a delivery that was down this long gravel street. There were only a few houses on my journey to the house that my delivery was. Still at this point, I'm totally fine. There's a ton of these types of roads out here. Well, I arrived at my destination. No mailbox. No driveway. No gravel. You could make out a little bit of a path that has been made from cars driving to the house. But I'm serious when I say a little bit. The driveway is maybe 250 yards long with the house at the end of it. I'm only sketched out because I'm in the woods and land is super unpredictable back here, meaning you never know when there's just a drop-off. I'm in a huge box truck. So if one tire were to slip off the side, the whole thing would go down. So I'm driving literally probably less than a mile an hour. Taking my time. Being extremely cautious. As I'm making this drive back to the house, I start kinda checking out my surroundings. I pass a really old, broken down truck that the ground has started to grow around. Again, super common back here. No biggie. As I get further and further down the driveway, I notice that I've probably passed about 4 satellite dishes, like cable dishes. I start approaching the house. This house from the outside looks like it is a Walter White Season 5 style cabin. It's a shack. I park and kinda just check out my surroundings. After about a minute I was like, oh, I'm just gonna deliver it and leave. I walked up to the front door of this cabin thing, and the front door had a large glass window in it. Not modern. Think old. Like a cabin that was built in the late 50s with no repairs. As I sit the small package down in front of the door, I glance inside the house. The main room, which would be like a living room I'm guessing, is completely empty. The only thing that is in this room is 2 foldable metal chairs. Both unfolded. Both facing a corner of the room, but nothing is in the corner. In the meantime, I'm trying to do my job with my right hand, where I keep making very quick glances inside. From what I saw, there was nothing in that house. Nothing. It was a shell. The kitchen may have had old appliances in it, but I wasn't really paying attention to that part. My sixth sense kicked in and my brain obviously said, this isn't right. So I turn around and start walking back to my truck. Maybe 30 feet away. I take my hood off my head and take my hat off so I can have a full peripheral view around me. I immediately start looking to see where the closest neighbor's house is. I saw a building up the hill just a tiny bit, but it honestly looked like it was on this guy's property. I'm sure this was my head playing major tricks on me, but as I'm walking back to my truck, I just feel a presence. I feel like it's hanging onto my back, getting heavier and heavier with every single step closer to the van I took. I jumped in my van, I locked the doors and checked the back to make sure no one was in there. The driveway, I back out of this entire driveway while checking my surroundings everywhere. I make it back onto the road. As I'm driving down the road, maybe 40 feet away from this dude's driveway, there's a trash bag in the middle of the street. It's open just a little bit. I slow down, and it looks like there's a woman's sweater or something in there. Was that a kill room? Was someone or multiple people held hostage on that property? Something was up. I immediately contacted my buddy and told about it. He suggested I go back and snap a few pictures. I agreed. About 5 minutes go by and I make it back to the address and the trash bag is completely gone. I looked everywhere on the street and the side of the street. Completely gone. But get this, I always thought about how I never know what I'm delivering or who I am delivering to. When I first landed this job, I remember thinking how crazy it would be if someone was holding people hostage in their house, torturing them and ordering their food and house supplies online because they are afraid of leaving the house with the kidnapped people alone. That's all I could think about when dropping off this package. I left that job not even a week later for different reasons. But I did tell my boss and he assured me that he would contact the local police department and take that house off of our normal route schedule. I never heard anything back about it. I'm aware that if the police went out there and found something or people, I would immediately be called in to tell them what I saw. So I'm going to assume that they went out to check it out and found nothing. But in the same sense, it makes me wonder about the trash bag immediately disappearing after I left. Did they realize that they messed up and I was going to say something so they prepared for that? I don't know. I also have no clue what the address was or how to get there by memory to check it out myself. But I think about that very often. And every single time I do, I get chills down my spine just because of the thought of the unknown. Story 4. Creepy cage in the woods. At the time, I was a 20-year-old female, and I had just moved alone to a small town in upstate New York. I had grown up in another, slightly larger town, about 60 miles away, and just wanted a new start. I love camping, often going camping in the Adirondacks, but at that time I hadn't yet made friends to go camping with, so I wasn't going to go into the real woods alone. Down the road from me, I had been walking and found an area where the power lines cut through a wooded section. The power lines were perpendicular to the road. It was near a house, but far enough to the right of the house where I thought people wouldn't mind if I walked up the trail that the power lines make. Not sure about other countries, but in the US they keep power lines clear in case maintenance is necessary. So, I wander up there, noticing how it's actually pretty deep woods and I can get far enough from the house that I saw on the road that they couldn't possibly think I'm trying to break in or anything. Bing! Idea! I could go camping up here. It's secluded enough to give the real woods experience but close enough to the road that I wouldn't be in real danger of wildlife or anything. Very sweet. So I do. I set up camp in this little clearing that I accessed by climbing the hill, following the power lines, then turned left onto what seemed to be a deer trail. Deer are everywhere in New York. Then I came upon this really nice, flat, grassy clearing. I built my fire off to the side, after making sure to clear the dead wood, etc. I'm feeling really smart and independent. It was creepy to sleep in the woods alone, as I had always had at least one camping companion, but whatever. Next day, I decide to wander further down the path to see where it leads. I walk for about a half hour, and I can see some fields on the right but they are in the distance and there is a fence between the fields and the path, so again I figure people can't be mad at me being here. Then I come across another path heading to the right. I follow it. A couple of feet in, it curves slightly and there is an old van on the left of the path. Well, that's strange, but it's about 1 p.m., near noon anyway, broad daylight, birds are chirping, so I feel no danger. I went up to the van, which had obviously been there a very long time. It was 70s style, made me think of Scooby-Doo van, and way overgrown with weeds. There are streaks of brownish red going down the side, from the bottom of the doors. I look in, and see what appears to be old bedding in the back, but it was all shredded, the curtains in the windows were shredded, and the clothing strewn about looked like it was from the 70s or early 80s. I still felt no danger signs. Snickering at the terrible fashions back in the day, I continue along the path for a short time, until I finish rounding the slight bend. I stop dead in my tracks. Finally, my reptile sense, or whatever you want to call it, wakes the hell up and starts screaming at me, full volume. Up ahead, there is a creepy-ass doll hanging from the trees. By its neck. With a rope, not just stuck in the trees. Just to the left of that, there is an old garage, overgrown with weeds. To the right of it, though, there is this huge cage-like structure, easily big enough to hold a full-sized man. It seems to be made up of pipes and other long metal objects, just kind of welded together. Some were up and down, some were across, and the squares they made weren't big enough to fit my head through, not that I tried. It had 4 sides and a ceiling. It had other creepy-ass dolls hanging from it. It also had reddish-brown stains running down the sides, just like the van. Further, behind it there is a run-down house. Creeped out as all hell, I just turned tail and ran. I am not a runner. I am a chunky girl, I had smoked for 6 years at that point, and I do not run. But I ran that day. I don't even remember the run, I just remember coming upon my campsite, grabbing my tent in one swoop as I ran past. Luckily I had put my things into the tent, ripping it out of the ground as I continued running. I left my cooler, my food, behind. Never went back for it, either. I dropped the tent stake somewhere along the way, and I had to repair rips in my tent. I tore down the hill, I'm still surprised I didn't break my neck, jumped in my car and sped home. I locked all my doors, then paced my house going, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? For hours. It's been 11 years since that incident, and even typing it now makes my hands shake. I now live almost 1,400 miles away, but I still just made sure my doors were locked. They are. The crazy thing is, it wasn't in deep woods. Maybe in the 70s it was though, who knows. As it stands now, though, there are people living within a short walk of this place. And no, I know you are going to ask, no I didn't call the cops. I can't really articulate why. My best analysis, looking back, is that I didn't want that creep to come find me. Should have. You were right. I am hoping that it was just an old crime scene, not some sick fuck who still keeps people in cages in the woods. So, crazy man or woman who built a human-sized cage in the woods and thinks hanging dolls is good feng shui, let's not meet. Story 5. Smiling man in a California ghost town deserted gas station. A couple years ago, one of my closest friends relocated cross-country with his long-term girlfriend to work a job he couldn't refuse. The only issue he had was that he did not want to fly his dogs out with him when they made the move since they'd be staying in a hotel for the first month. He was also a bit reluctant to fly them out due to health concerns for both pets. By the time he located a home to rent, he was missing his furry buddies and made the request of his sister, another close friend, and myself to drive them to him in a. Now we are Chicago folks, so the trip would be a long one. However, with the three of us to foot the near 30-hour drive, it would be a piece of cake. We left early and drove long hours. Along the way, it was decided between my friend and I that we'd foot the majority of the drive ourselves, and if we needed to, we'd let our friend's sister do some driving. We were in a bit of a time crunch due to a snafu with the rental agreement, so we didn't have the luxury to stop very often past an 8-hour stay at a Denver La Quinta Inn. As for the journey itself, it was relatively smooth, barring getting pulled over right before entering Utah for driving for 2 miles in the left lane of an empty highway. Oops. From that point we made it through Utah, Arizona, and Nevada without much trouble until we entered California in need of gas. I had been driving for the majority of the first day and tagged my buddy in after being pulled over. I remained in the shotgun seat as navigator, searching through the GPS for a fuel stop. We kept our eyes peeled for road signs and discovered a sign pointing to Yermo Ghost Town, or something along those lines, which had a mobile station. How wonderful! It was convenient, too, as it was located almost directly off of the interstate. We rolled in on a little more than fumes when we approached the pumps. Normally we let the dogs out at every rest stop, but having stopped not long before then and with both dogs sleeping snugly in the back, I decided to pump gas without anyone else leaving the vehicle. My buddy pulled us up on the opposite side of a beat-up green sedan with a short, plump gentleman who just turned in to approach the shop. I noticed a few other hoop ties at the pumps, all unoccupied, and there were a couple of other cars parked up near the station, most likely belonging to the employees, so nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Until I swiped my credit card. The pump rejected my first swipe attempt, which I chalked up to a misread. I swiped again and the pump read out, "Please see attendant." I was annoyed, but we needed gas. I tapped on the window and told my buddy what I was doing and asked if anyone needed anything. After taking their orders for Gatorade and Marlboro Reds, I walked up to the store and make a mental note of how strange this gas station was. Kind of quiet, especially for one right off the interstate, but that's no matter. As I walked in though, more weirdness. The first thing I notice is that there are some boxes of chips just left on the floor, like someone was stocking shelves and just quit. As I veered to my right, I noticed that immediately there is no one milling about in this place. With the 6 cars besides my own out there, I felt like I would see someone. Things got even weirder when I realized that there was no one behind the counter. No customers or workers. And then it dawned on me, what had happened to the gentleman who was at the pump adjacent to mine? Surely they can't all be in the bathroom. This is where I begin to feel this gnawing sensation in my stomach. Something isn't right. I have always been a person who felt like I could trust my instincts, and those instincts were screaming at me to just get the hell out. I want to run, but I hold back. I would look suspicious booking it out of a gas station that was empty and decide to just play it cool. Natural. Don't let your body language let on to how badly you're freaking out in your head. I was probably inside of this gas station for only a couple of minutes when I left, but I stopped just before exiting to listen for something. Anything. A flushing toilet would have been a good sound, but nothing. As I exit the shop and see my car, I begin to feel dread. It's like that moment in a movie where the hero is about to make it to the end of their trial, but the celebratory fanfare disappears and in that silence, something comes and strikes them down. I was about 25 yards from the car when I saw this gentleman come out from around the side of the shop opposite of me. This is not the same man as I saw while pumping gas. He was larger and had a peculiar look on his face. The best way I could describe it was like Nick Cage's smile from Face/Off before the titular act had occurred. I continued walking towards my car, but when I turned back to look at him, he was now walking towards me with a purpose. At this point, I noped my way back to the car with increased urgency in my step. And of course my friend has the door to the car locked like a complete douche clown. There is also the 95 pounds golden retriever sitting in my seat. Apparently my travel companions did not notice how freaked out I was, or the creepy gentleman still walking in my direction. I punched the window and told him to unlock the fucking door, to which he only half rolls down the window to tell me the dog was in my seat and they were afraid she'd jump out when I opened the door. I reached my hand in and threw the dog towards the back seat as hard as I could while my friend is just now realizing how freaked out I am. He started the car and drove off quickly. I took one last look back and saw Nick Cage had stopped about a pump away from where we were, still with that same look on his face. We found another gas station further down the road, this time with a ton of people inside and out. After thoroughly creeping out my friends with the story as I pumped gas, we made our way back to the interstate, which meant passing that gas station again. It's been about 15 minutes since we pulled out initially, and we go silent as we notice that those very same cars are still sitting in the same spots where we had left them. After thoroughly freaking out for a few miles, I received a phone call from my credit card company about a $100 charge at Mobile Station. The lady on the phone was really helpful in fixing the situation for me and was as entirely creeped out by the situation as we were. In the end, we made it to LA and had a great vacation, but it still bothers me as to what the hell was going on at this little gas station off the highway, and what the hell was that smiling man story? So, crazy smiling man and whoever else was lying in wait at the Yermo Town exit Mobile Station, let's not meet. Story 6. The humming was the worst part. A friend of mine is on here and she loves going through all the stories. She wanted to post this one of mine but conned me into signing up instead. Sadly, I have many stories, but this one was the most traumatic. So, my friends always say that if something unlucky is going to happen, then it will most likely happen to me. They also say that if there is a creeper around, then I will end up being the one creeped on. Both of these statements are, unfortunately, true. I've been stalked multiple times, some ending pretty badly, and I have the worst luck imaginable. This story happened 3 years ago and I still have nightmares about it. My mother came to stay with me for a week, which I knew would be a nightmare. We can hardly stand to be in the same room as one another, so fighting is inevitable. On her 5th night here we got into a heated debate about religion, and it somehow turned into a full-out screaming match. About an hour into the screaming, my apt manager knocked on the door. Before I could even apologize, my mother jumps in and says that I had been threatening her. I was so shocked and appalled that it threw me into a mini panic attack. I grabbed my keys from the key rack by the door and took off. It wasn't the wisest thing to do, I know, but I was so frazzled that I didn't know what else to do. I ended up sobbing my eyes out and just driving. This went on and off for about an hour and 70 miles. Driving has always calmed me down, so even after the tears subsided I kept going. About another hour later, I saw an exit for a dam, which surprised me. I had lived here for 2 years and I had no idea there was a dam anywhere close by. I decided to go take a look, even though it was 3 a.m. and pitch black. I still wasn't ready to head back, and this seemed like a good distraction. It was another 30 miles on a desolate road before I finally reached the dam. It was hard to miss because it was the only light I had seen for those 30 miles. I crossed the dam and saw that there were a couple turns leading to campsites. At this point I also realized that there was a legit lake. Yeah, I know, dam equals lake, but I didn't really put the two together. I decided to flip around and go back to a little parking area I had seen near the dam. Once there, I parked and my night took a turn for the terrifying. I parked and proceeded to make one idiotic move after another. I rolled down my windows and could hear the sound of water hitting a shore, but in the light of my headlights, I couldn't see where it was coming from. The mosquitoes were pretty bad, so I rolled my window back up and started fishing around in my back seat for a flashlight that I knew I had somewhere in the car. Then, I remembered that I had it in my trunk. Now, for what happens next, please feel free to label me as an idiot. I surely am. I popped the trunk, turned off my car, opened the door, stepped out, closed the door, got the flashlight, closed the trunk, went back to the door, and it was locked. My doors unlock when you open them, so I have no idea how the door became locked again, but it was, and like the moron that I am, I still had the key in the ignition. I knew the door should have remained unlocked, so I hadn't really thought about taking the key. Instantly tears started to well up because I knew I hadn't even bothered taking my phone with me. I panicked for a while, but then I remembered the campsites I had seen, and I hoped that maybe someone would be in one and that they would have a phone I could borrow. I started walking and fretting about waking up some poor stranger in the middle of the night, but I didn't see any other options. Each campsite I came to was completely empty. I think I checked 15 or so before I started to get nervous about how far I was wandering from my car. I think I had to have walked about a mile or so, and on the walk back, my battery started to fade on the flashlight. I was only about halfway back and my panic reached a whole new level. For whatever reason, the parking area and my car seemed like a safe haven, and I started sprinting. Remember what I said about being a moron with bad luck? Yeah. In my panic and in the darkness, I got switched around somewhere and ended up in a dead-end campsite, even though I would have sworn that I was still on the main road. This is when the major tears started. I panicked even more and ended up in yet another campsite. It felt like I was just getting more and more lost and I couldn't hear the water anymore, so I calmed myself and decided to stay put till morning, which I knew wasn't too far away. I sat down, wrapped my arms around my legs and proceeded to try rocking myself into calmness. It worked pretty well till I saw him. I had my eyes closed as I rocked, but then I heard a dull footstep. I looked up, obviously startled, and saw him standing only a few feet away. He was massive, probably about 6 feet 4 inches, and had a large but not fat build, like a football player or something. In hindsight, it's amazing that I hadn't heard him approaching sooner, or smelled him. For a second, all I could do was stare in horror and gasp out incomprehensible words. Then I screamed. It only took him a second to cross the distance between us, but I didn't even have time to properly get up before he had his hand around my throat, choking me. For reference, I'm not particularly big. 5 feet 3 inches, 132 pounds. Not skinny but not fat either. To him I was nothing more than a little rag doll. I wasn't even sure of what was happening, but I was being jerked around by the neck and arm. His hands were huge and every place he grasped and pulled felt like he would snap something. When the movement stopped, I was in his lap with my head pressed against his chest, and one of his legs partially crossed over me. He was half cradling me, half grappling me. I was too dazed to make a sound, but when I tried, his hand would tighten over my throat again. I went still for a few moments, but then I felt his tongue against my throat. He smelled rancid, like beer and something decomposing. I struggled to get free again, but this time he pinched my esophagus between his thumb and forefinger. It was light at first, but then he started increasing the pressure. By the time he was done, I felt like I was going to pass out. I don't want to go into too much detail because the memory is still hard to revisit, but he went back to licking, groping, and kissing. It was traumatizing, but he never went for anything too intimate. I gave up on trying to scream or get away, but he would still occasionally choke me. I sat there and simply sobbed. Then, possibly even more disturbing, he started to hum and rock me. I'm not sure why this part bothered me so much, but it did. His voice seemed higher than it should be, and his hum was rather nasally. I don't know how to describe it. Then, just as his humming was becoming almost frantic sounding, I saw headlights and he stopped. Somewhere in the distance, it looked as if a car was heading our way. He also saw it, and I felt panic well up inside of me, worried that he would drag me off somewhere, but he didn't. He simply let me go, stood up and walked the opposite way into the trees. Without him supporting me, I fell back slightly and watched him walk off. The sun wasn't up fully yet, but there was enough light to make out more of him than I had been able to before. He looked as bad as he smelled: dirty saggy jeans, a white hoodie that was so stained that it looked brownish-gray, and medium-length brown matted hair. I didn't see his face at all because I had kept my eyes shut for the entire time he had me. I could hear the car getting closer and I stood up. About 30 feet away was my flashlight and where I had been sitting, and I realized how far he had taken me while he pulled me around like a doll. I could see the car lights through the trees, but then they suddenly took a left and panic set in again. I worried that he would come back if he saw that the car wasn't coming to this campsite. I started to run. I didn't even care about staying on a path or road, just as long as I could still see the car. I caught myself on a few bushes and scraped myself falling a few times, but the pain didn't even register. I was too desperate to care. It felt like forever, and I don't know how long I actually ran, but I eventually ended up close enough to the car that the couple inside noticed me. They stopped and the guy got out. I remember not even being able to talk. For a long while I was just shrieking at the poor guy. Even before I could tell them what happened, his GF had called the police. Everything after that seems like a blur now. The couple drove to the parking area, as told to do by the cops, just in case the man was still around. The sheriff's department showed up, took my statement, took me to the nearest station, asked for another statement, checked me for evidence, called my mother and contacted the fire depot to break into my car for me. Just as my mom and friend arrived at the station, a sheriff's car pulled up and in the back seat was the man. I was promptly pulled back inside and asked to make a positive identification. It wasn't like in the movies though. They literally just brought him up to me and asked, "This him?" Now, this part still leaves me extremely emotionally confused, but it is what it is. As I looked up at him, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked ashamed, confused, and oddly vulnerable. And then his eyes started to tear up. I knew something had to be wrong with him mentally, and in a weird way, I actually felt some sympathy for him. I did confirm that it was him, but afterwards I actually worried enough about him that I asked about what would happen to him. This is where sympathy flew out the window. He was indeed mentally unstable, as I found out, but he was also a convicted sex offender. Yeah. I actually lucked out with what little had happened to me. Looking back, it seems more like a dream. My mother and friend took me back to my car, and rather than being stuck in a car with my mom, I opted to let her drive my car back, and I rode with my friend. The entire drive back, she kept drilling me for more information, but I couldn't bring myself to even talk about it. I still don't like talking about it, and I refuse to ever go camping again. I'm also extremely paranoid about always having my key on me when I step out of my car. Not a funny, haha kind of paranoid, but literally it's now a compulsion to check to make sure I have my key with me. I usually have to check 3 times to satisfy myself. As far as the guy goes, he was admitted into a psych hospital and I hope he remains there. Story 7. Close encounter with a serial killer on a highway rest stop. This encounter happened in the summer of 2006 when I was 20 years old. I didn't get my driver's license until January of that year, and driving opened up so many doors for me that I took a lot of solo road trips to my friends' houses in New England/Mid-Atlantic states. I also look young for my age and was often mistaken for a high school student in my early 20s. I was driving alone on I-78 on a random July day on my way to visit my friend in southern PA for a long weekend. Her parents were away and we had the house to ourselves and were planning on drinking/hot tubbing and watching Planet Earth drunk. It had just come out. Maybe run around some cornfields at night. I was so excited and had a great drive, listening to good music, and it was a beautiful day for driving. Right after I crossed the border from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, I stopped at one of the first rest stops to get gas and snacks for the last part of my drive. I have tried to figure out which rest stop this was and can't ID it, but it was a gas station with a large mini-mart. Opposite the gas station was the on-ramp back to I-78 West, and parallel to the on-ramp was a dirt road which comes into play later. I was heading into the store when a man in his late 30s/early 40s approached me. He was a stocky guy, decently tall, I'm 5 feet 1 inch, and had on a plain black tee and jeans with dark brown hair and mustache/goatee. He had come out of a black pickup truck parked a few spaces away from my car. He had a super intense gaze and immediately creeped me out. He just had a crazy energy about him. I don't really get vibes from people that often, but this was so strange. He stood too close. His gaze was crazy direct/focused. His word choice was strange. Immediately set off all my alarms. He asked if I was from the area, despite my Connecticut license plate, where I was headed, and if I knew of anything fun to do because he had plans later and time to kill beforehand. He invited me to go play mini-golf or watch a movie with him. I didn't answer any of his questions, declined his invitation to hang out, and told him I didn't know the area and walked away towards the store. I was blown away that he asked me to go somewhere with him. It was so random and uncomfortable. As I was walking away, he actually screamed out, "You're gorgeous," and the volume and tone made my hair stand on end. It was super aggressive and inappropriate, and he startled a family walking out of the store. It was so loud. I didn't turn around but went inside. He came into the store shortly after and was staring at me, so I went to use the bathroom and stayed in for at least 10 minutes texting my friend about this creep. When I came out, he wasn't in the store anymore, so I took my time buying drinks and snacks, sour bright crawlers and trail mix being my obligatory road trip food, and went out to gas up my car. I was relieved his car was gone and started thinking about the rest of my drive and getting excited to see my friend. When I pull up to the road to get back on the highway, I hear someone persistently honking his horn and see this creep show on the dirt road parallel to the on-ramp in his truck honking, shouting and waving at me to drive over to him. He was directly facing the gas station and had been waiting for me to pull up. I immediately freaked out and jumped on the on-ramp back onto I-78. He pulled onto the highway after me and I called my friend, extremely scared. I drove so fast and probably dangerously, and looking back I am lucky that I didn't get into an accident, but I didn't know what to do. He didn't follow me for that long, and I think after a few exits he pulled off. My friend and I had a backup plan that if I saw his car again she would direct me to a police station the next town over from her house instead of my going directly there and leading some freak to us. I didn't see the car again and went to my friend's, but the last hours of my drive I was extremely tense and anxious. I remember checking my mirrors regularly for this black pickup truck. It all ended well. I got to my friend's house safely and we had a nice weekend. The encounter was definitely creepy, but over the years I didn't put much thought into it. A few years ago, 2014, I was talking with another friend who is big into serial killers and mentioned my encounter, jokingly suggesting this was a serial killer I had met, and told her my experience. She was fascinated and wanted to Google active serial killers in the Pennsylvania area at the time. The first hit was for Adam Leroy Lane, and he looked almost exactly like the man I met back in 2006. Obviously, it could be my mind filling in the blanks, but the basic characteristics, 40s, tall but stocky, brown hair with mustache/goatee, and the time/area all match. In my memory, he was a little bit slimmer than the pictures, and it was 2006, not 2007, when he was actually convicted of murdering women. Still, it's an odd coincidence and one I've never forgotten. Story 8. Killer in the Pews. I was 10 years old when this account happened, in the fall of grade 5. My mother, sister, and I were visiting my aunt and uncle and their 2 sons in Kansas while on break from school. My family is from Gyeongju, South Korea, but my father is African American, so we grew up with both cultures and speak English fluently, so it wasn't hard traveling and interacting with others. My aunt is a devoted Christian and really loved bringing us to church with her and a family friend, Sandra. Now, I'm not against going to church, but I don't believe in a set God. Don't attack me. I do, however, believe in a higher power and spent a good portion of my time at a Buddhist temple. Our maternal grandfather is one of the head monks and tomb keepers. So despite being more spiritually inclined, I would get up early and put on my Sunday best, and would stumble out the door jet-lagged to make it to the service on time. The services always started normally. Greet thy neighbors, welcome the guest, singing, and eventually the preacher would come out and read through scripture. There were times prayers for those in the community would happen, or people coming forward to be saved in the form of baptism. My family normally sat in what my aunt called the best pew in the house, but we didn't sit in that pew alone. There was a man that sat between our family and another family of 3. This man between the families was a killer in the pews. Now I know what you must be thinking. How do I know he was a killer, right? Well, hold on and I'll tell you what I know. Now let's get back on topic. The man that sat on the other side of my mother and next to Mr. Hopper was considered an outstanding member of the community. He was active in the church, and his kids even used to babysit around the community. All in all, he seemed just like the typical American family man. He was odd though. Something about his mannerisms threw my family for a loop. This man used to lean over toward my mother to the point his head was almost on her shoulder, and he would take a deep inhale. And my mother would lean away towards me, almost crushing me, and promptly would ask the man, "Can I help you with something?" He smiled and just laughed a bit and shook his head not just a bit and muttered an apology for making us uncomfortable. He started, "You just smell familiar. It makes me remember something, and triggers a deep memory in me." My mom just laughed it off rather uncomfortably and stated it's Sea Island cotton from Bath and Body Works. This has been my mom's favorite scent ever since I can remember. It's her signature. And if you've ever smelled it, you would know just how fresh and clean the perfume is, so maybe he just was drawn in subconsciously closer like a moth to a flame. But as time progressed and service after service passed, he continued his sniffing ministries. My mom eventually had enough. This man was creepy and couldn't take the hint to back off. We jumped ship and moved the next service to an area more towards the back. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The man must have thought man overboard, because he jumped ship and maneuvered through the worshippers to, you guessed it, sit right next to us. This cycle continued up until we boarded our plan to go home. However, the story doesn't end here. Remember I mentioned the family friend, Sandra? Well, Sandra was a dental hygienist in Kansas, and she had a neighbor who was also one of her patients get murdered in her own home. I will not be disclosing her name out of respect for her family and friends, but this woman, may she rest in peace, was found bound with rope and a plastic bag over her head. It was apparent she had been tortured brutally before she passed. Not long after the discovery, another body was discovered in yet again their own home, and mocking letters started being sent into the local PD station. If you haven't figured it out yet, this was the work of serial killer BTK, which stands for bind, torture, kill. He was back after years of silence. Initially, police thought maybe it was a copycat killer since BTK had been quiet for so long. They assumed he died or moved away among other possibilities. The killings continued for a bit longer, and from what I remember, my aunt and uncle were on edge. Their whole community was. BTK was eventually caught, and I can't tell you all the details regarding that since I was back home in Korea. But I can tell you we received a terrifying phone call not long after. My aunt and Sandra called to inform us it was over. BTK was caught. Great news, right? We should have slept easy knowing our friends and family were safe. They are no longer prey. BTK wasn't just a serial killer, he was the man from the pews, the one that sniffed my mother consistently. He was Dennis Rader. The thing that scares me most? My mom could have been on his list. She could have been a victim, all because we sat in the pews and greeted our neighbor with brotherly love. BTK, do me a favor and let's not meet again. Story, mine. To my former cult members, let's never meet again. For the purposes of this story, I will be changing some names, and I'm going to be really vague about the location, just because it feels wrong to use their names / if I did and used the location, folks would know who they were. Funny story, though, this takes place in the other college town in the state you're going to Thanksgiving for court. To my former cult members, let's not meet again. In the fall of 2015, I began college in a very small town in the middle of nowhere. Its population as of 2019 is 55,489. This town was in the middle of the Midwestern state I lived in the middle of the Great Plains. The town was pretty much only existent because of the college. It was a state college which has about 20,000 students a year. As you could imagine, the college brought in a plethora of faculty, business, and really put the town on the map. I personally stuck out like a sore thumb. You see, even though I lived in the Bible Belt, I had been Wiccan since I was 15, I never identified with Jesus and God when I grew old enough to dissect the Christian faith. A big aspect about my personality is that I am very accepting. I mention this because it, ultimately, led to some chaos later on. I'm the class clown mom friend type. I'm sure you know the type. Goofy and caring, pretty much ride or die. So I was in the middle of nowhere at the beginning of my college career, and I was surrounded by strangers who were just as nervous and awkward as I was. Due to being in the middle of the Bible Belt, my friends really loved my tarot card, medium, future-seeing persona. Quickly, while making new friends, I ran into a few folks who wanted to learn how to read tarot. We lived in the same dorm community, they were nice, and I loved teaching. So that's how I ended up getting into cahoots with Alex, Davis, April, Sam, Rosie, Katie, and Sky. They were friends from the year prior, so I was sort of folded into the friend group as the newest, shiniest object. After mentioning that I read tarot, the group was over the moon. One afternoon, in the basement of our dormitory, I had a tarot reading session for the group. It was a lazy fall day mid-November. Surrounded by soda cans, Kit Kats, and our schoolwork, I began to read each and every group member's cards. With reading, you start to peek into a person's soul. Each card gives you a sliver of personhood. I quite regularly have had to console people for the truth that lies within the reading. I often have had to play the role of the therapist after the cards read people for filth. So it was unsurprising to me when the group sat in shock and curiosity, goosebumps prickling their arms. It was a normal response. Hours flew by. I did general readings, question-based readings, love life readings, you name it. As the time rolled on, more of my talent slipped out. Soon I was reading palms, giving psychic advice, talking about my Wiccan journey. I believe that what you take from the earth, you should give back. It is inherent to my belief system to do everything with love, to never mean any ill will. Alex asked me if I could teach them about my belief systems. Then Katie, then Davis. Before I knew it, everyone in the group had asked for impromptu teaching. Don't get this wrong, I love teaching. But more so, I craved this positive attention. My childhood was quite awful, I was very abused. I just wanted people who cared about me. These people were some of the first to really seem to care about me, who were really interested in what I had to say. So, with rose-colored glasses, I began a fun little info sesh with my brand new friends. I didn't see the warning signs. What started out as little meetings in the study rooms turned into hour-long lectures where the group hung to every word I said. As we got closer, more of my horrific past was uncovered. I shared tales of my trauma, of all the times I should have died, of the beatings, of how my mom tried to murder me. I thought I had found my tribe. I was really excited and pleased to be around folks. I didn't start to see the warning signs until it was too late. Things went smoothly for a while, a routine of teaching the group, hanging out, having dinner, talking about normal things, like school and what was going on in the dormitory communities. Things felt pretty normal. I really liked it. One of the group members, Davis, was transitioning female to male, and he struggled a lot with his identity. He was raised in a pretty strict household, so his transition wasn't taken very well by his family. He also struggled with BPD, which made people in the group uncomfortable, I think because they didn't understand it. Keep in mind, mental health at the time wasn't really something that people were open about as it was the Bible Belt. So, Davis would occasionally act erratic, start fights, get worked up, cry randomly, etc. I am sure part of this was due to transitioning. I can't imagine how emotional and hard it would be to go through that. What really set things off was when Davis started doubting if he should fully transition or not. Davis had already been on testosterone for quite some time, was male-presenting, but did not have top surgery yet. One day, right before spring break, Davis had worn a dress, makeup, and heels around campus. At the time I thought it was kind of strange, but I figured it was Davis's life, so it didn't matter to me. The rest of the group, however, started to obsess over this. It was very out of character, but the group thought there was more to it. When Davis left for class, adorned in his dress and heels, Alex started speculating. There was a long, weird history between Alex, Davis, and Sky, one where Davis was sort of relationship-like, flirting with both Alex and Sky, creating some animosity. Alex and Sky were best friends, but Davis had sort of wiggled his way into both of their hearts. Alex wasn't one to really discuss their feelings, so they pretended this love triangle didn't affect them, but Alex had become bitter. After Davis had walked out, Sky in tow, Alex began their speculation. What's wrong with him? Why is he acting like that? It's like I hardly know him. Katie, one for gossip, joined in. It honestly is like Davis is a completely different person. I don't know who this is, but I hate him. He's taking advantage of Sky. The rest of the conversation began to snowball. It was a frustrating situation for those who had been in the friend group for a long time. I was pretty much indifferent. I didn't know what was going on, and honestly, I thought that people were kind of making a fuss out of nothing. If you're uncomfortable with what's happening, then talk it out. I digress. I had been working on a term paper, not really minding too much about the conversation until April asked me, "Do you think he could be messing around with some bad magic?" I shrugged. Davis had asked about love spells and other stuff that I don't really mess with. He was really into the idea that he could put a spell on someone and make them fall in love with him. I had told him that taking away free will is something you should never mess with. The universe doesn't do kindly to those who harm, obstruct, or take free will away from someone. April had been there when Davis asked. When Alex looked questioningly at her, April spilled the beans. Something in Alex's face contorted, as if you could see their heartbreak turn into pure rage. Alex excused themselves, and that was that. I remember being a little stressed about the situation. I hated conflict back then. I was spending spring break at Rosie's house. Her and Sam lived in the same town. Alex and Katie would be there too. When I agreed to spend the break with them, it was before drama had started. But by the time we got to spring break, it was too late to change my plans. The whole break was spent listening to the conspiracy grow. The four of them had begun to elaborate on this bad magic idea. Rosie thought maybe Davis was possessed. I told them that I didn't think it was likely. I had a feeling things were starting to go awry, things felt weird. I had never been in the presence of a group of people who just accused another of being possessed. Things were weird. When I shot down the possession idea, they mentioned the time Davis growled the week prior. We were playing a game online when Davis growled as a response. I had jokingly said he sounded like a demon. I still told them that it was nothing, but they would not let up. Realizing I was in trouble, I came up with a quick solution. I told them we could do some protection spells, so if anything was going awry, we would be okay. That seemed to appease them well enough. Luckily, they left the topic alone until we were heading back to campus. "We need to do an exorcism on Davis," Rosie said, a wild look in her eyes. Rosie had dabbled in paganism before she had met me, so she already had a solid set of beliefs and theories. The issue here, however, was that Rosie and Sam thought they could use their paganism as a tool to control those around them. I tried to correct this thought process, as it was against my belief system, which they seemed really receptive to, until they felt threatened. Davis had sent a text message to Rosie about some drama with Alex and Sky, sending Rosie into a spiral. Before I knew it, the narrative shifted into, Davis is possessed by the demon Lilith. I didn't know what to do. I told them that he wasn't. I said it didn't make sense. I was too late. I didn't know. I figured that if I got back to campus, took some time away from them, everyone would calm down. So that's what I did. I tried to do as much damage control as I could on the rest of the ride, but then when I got back to the dorm, I locked myself away in my room. When asked, I just said I was behind on work from spring break. Things were quiet and I felt safe. I figured it was temporary insanity or something. I was sitting downstairs talking to April a few days after I had locked myself away. We were just chit-chatting about what she had done over the break when I saw Rosie and Katie rush past the sitting room. They were frantic. They waved at us when they ran past, but didn't say anything. A bit later, Sky ran in the same direction, crying. When he saw us, he rushed in. Davis said he's a demon and needed to be exorcised. I jumped to my feet and started running toward his dorm. Sam and Alex stood in the hallway. Their faces hardened when they saw me, Sky, and April walking up. "You're not allowed in there, Davis is a danger to you," Sam said. He admitted he was possessed. "He's not possessed. Let me in." We bickered for a while until I said that if they were going to do an exorcism, they needed me in there. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Davis was laid on the bed, tied to the bed frame. He was crying. Rosie and Katie were inside, setting things around the bed. Rosie held a tattered, old book in her hand. There was sage burning on a plate. Katie yelled something, but I couldn't focus. I just kept thinking that these people were fucking crazy. All I could see was Davis, crying on the bed. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know I was possessed. I didn't know I was going to hurt you." Davis wailed, shaking. "We're going to get the demon out. You're going to be okay." I just kept saying that he wasn't possessed, but nobody was listening to me. That's when I saw the knife. It was bronze in color, with something dark crusted on it. It sat in a bowl from the dining hall. Sat in a mix of what looked like salt and what looked like blood. In shock, I looked over to Rosie, spotting a bloody gauze on her arm. It was like my world stopped. At this point, I had realized these people were crazy. I didn't think they were killer crazy. I had seen enough scary movies that I could only imagine what was going to happen. I grabbed the knife and cut through the cloth that tied Davis down, grabbed his wrist and bolted from the room. I called Davis's mom and told her to come get him. We went to my dorm until she got there, with me just trying to talk some sense into him. Davis went home shortly after. Rosie, Katie, Sam, and Alex were blowing up my phone. April had come with me when I ran out with Davis. When he had gone home, she started to talk about how I needed to be careful, because if Hillary Clinton were elected president, because I was special. My mother had told me that she had to kill me, or else the government would get me. That I was special. April knew this, apparently she believed it too. I just nodded, telling her I needed to go to sleep. After she left, I started filing paperwork to transfer schools. I moved 2 hours away, blocking everyone in group's phone numbers. I couldn't believe everything that had happened, but looking back I started to see that the signs were there all along. The passing "you're like a witchy Jesus" or blind faith in everything I said. The most memorable moment was when I told them that the sky was actually green. I was just joking around, being a sarcastic asshole, but April and Alex just nodded. When I said I was joking, April defended them, saying, "Well, technically the sky just reflects the earth, so it kind of is green." Hindsight is 20/20. I accidentally started a cult, creating a small hellhole where everyone blindly believed everything I said and thought I was the modern-day Jesus. So, to my former cult members, let's never meet again. Also, please get help. Hope it wasn't too long. I ended up typing quite a lot more than I expected. It's just a long story about the chaos of my freshman year of college. Story 10. Creepy neighbor and maybe attempted murder. My friend Sally has had a bad run with neighbors, but this was one of the worst. Sally lives very close to me, about a 10-minute walk. We were both around 14 years old when this happened. We live in a rural area, so we both have a lot of land. Me and Sally decided to go camping on her land. We bought cheap hammocks and went through the bushland. The days prior we spent clearing some of the razor grass with a cane knife to make a path. We probably should have worn long pants because we ended up with little cuts all over our legs and some on our arms. We set up our hammocks and brought quite a few blankets because it does get pretty cold at night even though you're sweating throughout the day. We were still on her property and hadn't gone to her neighbor's boundary. Her neighbor had just leased the land to new tenants. Me and Sally were sitting on our hammocks talking and laughing. This was around 9 p.m. We heard something in the bush. We just thought it was a wallaby. There's plenty of wallabies around there. Then we could see the figure of a man. We were whispering to each other trying to see who it was. At first we thought it was her brother. He came and scared us when we were camping previously. Then as the person got closer we were thinking it could have been her dad. It was dark and the bush looked the same from every angle. We realized the man was coming from the other direction than her house. We didn't dare move and covered our torches under our blankets. The man came up and said hi and introduced himself as Ben. Now Ben was extremely drunk, he staggered around and he reeked of alcohol. He started saying how we had a nice little camp here and said something pretty unsettling. "I'll have to come out and sunbake naked here on one of these hammocks." Me and Sally gave each other worried looks but didn't say anything. It only got worse from there. I can't remember everything he said because it was a while ago and he was mumbling on for what felt like forever. But some of the things that stuck out were, "I'll have to kill Yas Wolf Creek style," and said, "You're nearly legal then," when he asked us our age. Ben was probably in his 40s. Me and Sally were texting each other while he was talking and coming up with an escape plan. He also offered us a puff on the magic dragon and pulled out a glass pipe. We declined. Sally said that we were leaving back to the house to make food. He told us to come back. We left our blankets and most of the stuff there and legged it. We told her dad what happened and we slept inside. The next morning we went back to our campsite to find everything burnt. A circle with probably a 20 m radius was all burnt. Coming from that circle was a line of burnt grass. Going towards the neighbor's house. I'm not a firefighter or do forensics, but it seemed obvious that some kind of fuel was used. Me and Sally were talking and it dawned on us the possibility that Ben may have thought we were in the hammocks due to the pile of blankets. Ben was definitely drunk enough not to be able to tell the difference. We went and told Sally's dad, who then checked it out and then went next door. Ben's roommate answered the door and said Ben wasn't home and apologized. And even gave Sally's dad $50 for the blankets and hammocks. Nothing more happened for a few months. Sally told me at school about how Ben had been caught on camera sneaking around her yard. I went to her house after school because she was going to be home alone until her dad finished work. I ended up sleeping over there that night. That's when he came over. Ben was drunk and came out the front of Sally's house and started yelling he accused Sally of stealing his dog. Sally's dad called the police. They arrested him. The next day we found a knife in the yard. It wasn't from Sally's house. The police came again and we told them about the knife and they got the footage from the cameras as well. I don't know what happened to Ben, but he no longer lives next to Sally. So Ben, let's never meet again. I have a photo of the burnt campsite somewhere. It might take some digging to find though, so I'll post it when I find it. Story 11. Hot Springs Hunters. So, I take my dad's ashes up to Glacier National Park every year. I lived in Colorado when this story happened, and I was headed south through Idaho after I had visited Montana. My car broke down in Salmon, Idaho, and a nice man helped me out. I was headed through the mountains to Boise to visit a friend. It was about a 5-hour doctor. Before I entered the truly mountainous section of Idaho, I saw a hot spring on the side of this 2-lane highway along the Salmon River. I decided to take a dip after the stress of having my car break down. The hot spring had a bathhouse up at the top near the road, and a wheelchair ramp that went down to the area near the springs, where they were on the side of the river. People had created little bath-shaped sections in the river that were separated by river stones. Actually, you could sit in a spot that was shaped like a hot tub so that it held the water from the hot springs while the river rushed over it. I got out of my car and headed down to the hot spring. I took my dog with me. It was twilight. About every half an hour, a car passed by. Knowing that I was alone, essentially, I took off my top. I was sitting in the hot spring and actually took a photo of a car approaching. The car pulled up next to mine, in front of the bathhouse. It was a truck with 3 men in it. Seamlessly, 1 man got out of the driver's side, and 2 men got out of the passenger side. They moved without qualms and were covered in heavy black gear. They looked like hunters. I couldn't see the expressions on their faces. The driver headed down the wheelchair ramp towards me, not hesitating. He took big long strides. I recognized that there was danger. The 2 passengers from the other side of the car headed down the steep bank along the wheelchair ramp, taking a shortcut. I was stuck in between both parties. Hastening, I hid and dressed myself underwater while my dog growled. He never growls. I've only heard him growl all of twice in my life, and this was the second time. The driver kept on walking towards me. He walked out onto the rocks into the river, continuously walking towards me even though he was covered in heavy gear that could get him waterlogged if he fell in the river. The other 2 passengers from the side of the car were also walking out on the rocks, directly in front of me. The driver got so close that I had to grab my dog before he lashed out at the driver. I was freaking out. The man was walking out onto the stones so that he could reach me. He was not hesitating. I couldn't see his face. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and my clothes. I dragged my dog in between the 2 parties, my heart in my ears. The driver would not stop. He turned around very quickly, making an arc, coming for me still. He was still taking big strides. The passengers were walking towards me as well. I was trapped in between them. I ran up the bank dragging my dog pretty much by his collar all the way into my car. The only way that I could get into my car without them grabbing me was by throwing my dog into the back and lunging myself into the passenger side door of my car. I threw my keys into the ignition and turned them right when the men were walking up between my car and their car. I happened to hit the lock button on the door right when they walked up. Before anything else happened, or before I saw their faces, I ended up throwing myself into the driver's seat, reversing my car, and hightailing it out of there. I drove about 20 minutes down the road. I crossed the river on a bridge and hid my car behind a bank near other campers. It was well hidden from the main road. The campers were looking at me wondering what was going on. I sat and I waited. Another 10 minutes passed by, and lo and behold, the truck drove by. The hunters were looking for me. I managed to wait another half an hour, and then drove up to the mountains, over to Boise and into safety. Story 12. Creeper in the Woods. So let me start off with a little background info. I am a 14-year-old Canadian male and this happened around a year ago. This story is nothing but the truth. Me and my grandparents are extremely close and have been all my life. So my grandfather is an outdoorsy, get off your phone kind of guy, and he pitched the idea of going camping in early August 2017. I was kind of excited because I don't get outside as often as I should and I figured it would be some quality time with him. That being said, we weren't going camping. He wanted to go into the woods. I told him about a nearby campground we could go to. He was still thrilled, so we embarked on our weekend journey. Let me paint you a picture. Our campsite was a dead end aside from the one next to ours. It was right near the lake. It was beautiful, but to our dismay we had people right beside us. We did all the camping things, made a fire, swimming, and even the infamous spooky stories around the campfire. We hit the sack around 10 p.m. because there was not much else to do. As soon as my head hit the pillow, it started. The crunching of leaves on our campsite. We thought nothing of it at the time because the night was still young. Some assholes were setting off fireworks and others were having a raging party. Hell, even our neighbors were still laughing. I fell asleep for a while. 11 p.m. is when it started to get weird. The party was still on, but our neighbors shut up. So the crunching of leaves didn't make sense. It was consistent, so my guess is the noise was footsteps. No one needed to be on our campsite, so falling asleep was a slightly bigger challenge. My grandpa seemed to be having an even harder time as he seemed to be on alert mode. Yes, I know we are both paranoid, but I feel like that paranoia keeps us safe. I wake up and check my watch. 12:00 a.m. It reads. It's starting to rain, the water is splashing against the rocks, and the thunder in the distance is quiet enough to sleep with. Even over the sound of rain pattering against our tarp, I still hear the fucking footsteps. The unsettling nature of the situation starts to eat away at me. I wasn't scared, just creeped out. Sleep overcame me, but it didn't come easy. My grandpa finally slept too. A crack of thunder woke me again. A full-blown thunderstorm now. I felt relieved as I thought the footsteps stopped. Until I heard the thump of wood. I don't know what the person did, but I heard 2 very loud knocks. Followed by 2 large splashes. This was my only thought as the footsteps continued around our campsite. I stayed still for 2 hours. 5 a.m. Daybreak was near, but my heart nearly exploded when I heard someone fumbling with the tent zipper and the fabric. I say the outline of 3 fingers being dragged across the tent. My body shut down as they came closer and stopped when the fabric brushed against my head. Every nerve in my body told me to scream, but I didn't. The hand trailed away and became quieter as they left our campsite. I woke my grandfather as soon as the sun came up. Before we left, I went to investigate our site. Lots of the ground was turned into mud in the storm, so the mass of boot prints were easily noticeable. Easy to say we dipped the fuck out after that. And that was it. Nothing ever came of it aside from the story I can share. Me and my grandpa don't talk about it, and if anything, it brought us closer together. Anyway, if the creepy camping site stalker who walked in circles around our campsite for 8 hours ever reads this, how about we never meet again? Story 13. It should have been a beautiful drive, but it was a trap. This story is why I always tell someone where I'm going and how I'm getting there. I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend Amy and I, both females, would spend many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in March 2010, we were traveling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque. Always up for exploring, we took a back road rather than traveling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on NM55. It's a remote, tiny 2-lane highway. We loved those types of roads, up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat and desolate desert. You can see for miles. And there is virtually nothing except dirt and rock between towns, and towns can be miles apart. So we were on NM55 going north. After a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck up ahead of us going the same direction. Suddenly, he stopped his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him, and as we got closer, we began to get uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and we began wondering if we should turn around rather than come up to him and have to stop. We were about a half a mile away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway, but his truck was still pointed the direction we were going. We tried to relax a little. Surely this guy was a rancher or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. 1, there was only one person in the truck, a middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off us, and 2, he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started following us. But he never got too close. He would get to within a few car lengths and then drop back a little and then speed back up again to within a few car lengths. We were getting nervous. We realized how alone we really were. We had seen no other traffic on that road and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. We checked our cell phones and neither one had a signal, typical for remote New Mexico, but scary given our present situation. Amy was driving and speeding up, while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road that would have more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel this one to get to the next town, Mountain Air. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slowly, maybe 20 mph if that. This pickup was old and beat up whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy had us up to 75 miles per hour, which wasn't typical for us on these 55 miles per hour highways, and we blew by the old pickup. As we passed it, we saw that it was another middle-aged guy, and he was talking into a walkie-talkie. After the white pickup passed him, he pulled a U-turn and pulled in behind it. As we watched all this, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking into his walkie-talkie. No doubt these two knew each other. We were being deliberately followed. And for the first and only time in my life, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road. We truly thought an old beat-up pickup guy had set up a trap in the road and our vehicle would be disabled somehow. We talked about driving into the fields. We were in an SUV. But this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off-road and got cornered. So we stayed on the highway. By now, white pickup truck guy was right on top of us. We could see him talking into the walkie-talkie and he stayed right on our bumper. An old beat-up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup inched closer. His maneuvering and edging closer made it apparent that he was trying to bump us. I watched helplessly as he got to within inches of our back bumper. Amy floored it. We were passing 80 miles per hour and edging up to 90 miles per hour. The road was flat and deserted, but any little thing going wrong would have been catastrophic. We absolutely were not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of was that he wanted to pass us and get in front of us. If he got in front of us and his buddy was behind us, then we'd be boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides of us. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it to safety in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that said, Salinas Pueblo Missions National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of that road and onto the highway in front of us. As we came up on the blue pickup, we saw the plate said, U.S. Park Service. We looked at each other and then looked behind us. Both pickup trucks did U-turns and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup to Mountain Air and then made our way to Albuquerque. I don't know exactly what those guys' intentions were, but they weren't good. There is something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police and they said they would keep an eye on things. This area is very near Belen, New Mexico, which is where Tara Calico was abducted. It's also about 100 miles from Elephant Butte, New Mexico, which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. We didn't put all that together until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe that there are others out there like him. And whoever abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into meth lab territory. But since this happened on an actual highway, rather than a backcountry road, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on out there, it's not good. So, let's not ever meet, or have anyone else ever meet, these guys. Story 14. I was told you guys over here might like my story about camping in the Appalachians. A few years back my girlfriend and I, having hiked several other parts of the Appalachian Trail, decided we wanted to give the southern portion of Virginia's trail a shot. It is about 166 miles long and runs through George Washington and Jefferson National Forests from Roanoke County to Pearisburg in Giles County. This is definitely one of the more remote and less traveled parts of the trail, which is exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way to the start of the Virginia Creeper Trail to begin our journey. We had planned our journey to end at Damascus and figured that by the time we got there we would be more than ready to get home to our own beds. It was early October and the changing of the leaves and colors were amazing. The air was crisp and cool. Perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful. Just your typical hike. But our last couple of nights is where things got weird. On this portion of the trail, you are supposed to camp on the trail or a designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people and didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night. We decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot off the trail. A little searching around and we found a spot a little ways off the trail in the middle of a small clearing. It was perfect. We set up camp, cooked some food, talked for a while, then snuggled up and went to sleep for the night. Somewhere around 2 a.m. I was awoken by my girlfriend shaking me awake, telling me, "Get your gun. Someone is outside walking around our tent." She informed me that she woke up to what sounded like someone right outside the tent running a knife or something along the side while circling us. When hiking, I carry a 1911 and a judge with me. You never know exactly who or what you might run into when on such a long hike in a remote location. I got the judge out of my pack and then we sat silently listening for any sounds. A few minutes of nothing but the breeze blowing through the trees, and then I heard it. Snap, crunch, snap. Someone or something walking in the woods behind our tent. I got the flashlight and silently made my way out of the tent. Our fire had gone out, so it was nearly pitch black, illuminated by only the dim glow of the October moon. I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't flick the flashlight on right away so as to not give away that I was out of the tent and have it become a shining beacon of my location. Instead, I waited to hear more noises. After a few minutes, snap, crunch, crack. It sounded like it was bipedal based on the way the steps were paced. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area with light. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree. I yelled out and told them to go away and that I was armed. I kept the light on the area with my gun drawn and slowly approached towards the area where I thought I saw the figure. Then, from my right, I hear what sounds like someone running away through the woods. I spin and face my light that way, and then from the original spot hear who or whatever was there take off into the woods. There's no way I am giving chase, so I return to the campsite. I tell my girlfriend about what happened and I end up sitting guard outside the tent, in the darkness until daybreak. In the morning, I looked around a bit for signs of who or whatever it was and I discovered a boot print in some soft moist dirt not far from our tent. It wasn't mine and it wasn't my girl's. This freaked me out as it confirmed that someone, perhaps more than one, was skulking around our tent in the dark. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to freak my girl out any more than she already was. At this point we were pretty deep in and still had 2 days left. That day we walked a little faster than normal and covered as much ground as possible. When it came time to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place the tent in a small overhang and prevent anyone from coming up behind us. The whole day up to this point I had a feeling we were being followed. I had no confirmation of this as I hadn't seen or heard anyone else, but it was just a gut feeling. We set up camp and made some food, then retreated to the tent. I gave my girl the 1911 and I kept the judge right next to me and I assured her that if I slept at all, it would be with one eye open. After a while, she drifted off to sleep and I stayed awake listening to the sounds of the woods at night. I was awake for a few hours, just waiting to see if anything was going to happen. At some point I guess my exhaustion caught up with me and I drifted off. I awoke sometime later to what sounded like someone going through our stuff outside the tent. I grabbed my gun and woke my girlfriend, shushing her to be quiet. From the faint glow of the fire I could see someone's silhouette against the tent. There was really someone out there. I yelled out to them something along the lines of, "We are armed, get the fuck out of here." They dropped what they were doing and bolted. I came out of the tent, gun drawn and ready to shoot someone. Our stuff was strewn all about. They had rummaged through quite a bit of our stuff. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction whoever was out there had fled. There was a creek nearby and I walked to the edge, where there was a small trail running alongside it. Down the creek I could see a light. It looked like a lantern the way it flickered. Then I saw 3 more emerge from the other side of the woods. I told my girlfriend to start packing up whatever she could and that we were leaving now. We packed up everything of value, left the tent and a few other items and headed back onto the trail, in the middle of the night. I kept hearing people talking off in the woods and hearing branches snap in quite some ways. I kept looking behind us every few seconds to make sure nobody was coming up on us. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something happened, we were still a long way from anywhere and quite literally on our own, since we hadn't seen another hiker the entire time we had been out there. I really felt we were in serious danger. We had been walking for quite some time when I heard something in the woods behind us. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and saw someone step out onto the trail and just stand there watching us. It was just as the sun was coming up and barely any light. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette. I stopped and looked at them for a sec and asked them who they were and what they wanted. They just stood there silently, watching us, and then turned and walked back into the woods. We picked up the pace and kept going, looking back every so often. We didn't see them again, but my gut told me they were still there for quite a ways. We eventually reached the end of the trail and got to where we had parked my girlfriend's car, extremely exhausted. We made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a meal for a clan of cannibalistic inbred hillbillies, which is what I pictured happening in my head the whole time. I have no idea who they were or what they wanted. Maybe it was someone just messing with us? Maybe it really was a clan of deformed hillbillies who were hunting us. I will never know because I will not be returning to find out. Story 15. Wrong reason to be scared. I grew up in a relatively small town in northwest Ohio with a population of around 20,000. A typical summer day for me at age 12 involved waking up fairly early, eating as much Crispix cereal as I could in a short amount of time, getting on my bike, leaving my house, and not returning until dark. Being the youngest of 3 boys, I had 2 older brothers who were 4 and 6 years older than me, and the easiest way to avoid their torments was to not be there. It was towards the end of summer, and I remember having plans to go fishing with a friend that morning. I was up early and did my usual routine before heading out to meet up with him so that maybe we could catch some shitty carp or old boots from the bank of the muddy river that ran through town. It wasn't really my thing, but at least it was something to do and gave me a reason to be out of the house early enough to avoid possibly taking a beating from one of my big brothers. The fastest way for me to ride to my friend's house involved cutting through a drive that led to the deserted Daughters of America home, or DOA as everyone called it. The place terrified me my entire childhood to the point of having a recurring nightmare about it. There was about a 300-yard driveway with a cast iron gate overhead that led directly to the front of the building with large enclosed fields on either side of it. It had been abandoned or unused as long as I could remember, and although someone cut the grass a few times a year, the trees and foliage were all overgrown and unkempt. The building itself seemed to be in pretty good shape, but the whole place just scared me, and every time I pedaled past the building on the lane that cut around its left-hand side, I always had that feeling of being watched. After fishing for a few hours, my friend and I both got a little bored, packed up our stuff, and headed to my house. We passed through the DOA grounds on our way back, and I was a little freaked out going through there like always. When we got to my house, we threw our fishing poles in the garage, grabbed a couple Cokes from the refrigerator, and a basketball from the shelf before heading the opposite way we had just come from to the park that was nearby. We played basketball for a while with a bunch of older guys, but I think my friend felt about basketball the way I felt about fishing, so he took off after a few games. I kept playing until late afternoon when the game had dwindled down to just a few guys and eventually everyone was leaving. There were still several hours until it would be dark, so I was trying to think of what I was going to do next when Mike struck up a conversation with me. I kind of knew Mike, but really only from playing basketball at the park. All I really knew about him was that he was a few years older than me and sucked at basketball. He was skinny with shoulder-length sandy blonde hair and was a little over 6 feet tall with little to no coordination. He was definitely a little weird too, but when he got around to asking me if I wanted to go for a ride on our bikes together, I couldn't think of anything better to do, so I agreed. We ended up back down by the river, and I remember he showed me a cool little spot that I hadn't known about where you could cross a washed-out drive onto a little island in the middle of the river. Then we headed just down the street from there, where he introduced me to an even older guy named Bill who was in his late 30s or early 40s and was sitting on the porch of a rundown house. He was a kind of rough-looking guy, about 6 feet tall, with stubble and black hair that had gray creeping into it from the sides where it came down over his ears in a 70s sort of style. We all talked for a bit before the two of them went inside while I sat on the porch. I could hear them talking through the screen door, but couldn't make out exactly what they were saying since they seemed to be using a hushed kind of tone. Not whispering, but not talking at a normal volume either. I heard a third man's voice say something about leaving, and eventually they came back outside, and somehow it was decided that we would all go for a bike ride. So now I'm riding my bike through downtown with two dudes I don't really know and don't really like. I remember thinking that the whole situation was just off in some way. After stopping at a store and them buying me candy and a pop, we were riding again. It was getting close to sunset, so I finally spoke up and said that I would have to go home soon. Bill tells me there is one last place we had to go and to follow him, so I did. We weave through town and slowly but surely I realize we are making our way to the goddamned D of I. We ride up to the side of the building from the back and around to the front where Bill stops. I'm terrified, but I don't show or say anything because I'm an idiot kid trying to act tough. Bill is in front of me and Mike is behind. Bill gets off his bike and starts telling me something about how cool the building is, and how much he's always wanted to go inside, and that he thought we could all go in together if we can find a way. All I'm thinking at this point is, hella no. Mike is off his bike now too, and they both push their bikes off to the side of the steps leading up to the front door. I'm still straddling my bike with my feet on the ground as they proceed to try to open the front door. It's locked. Bill looks back at me, urging me to come on, and says something about needing help. I get off my bike and lay it down on its side directly in front of the front door at the base of the steps. I'm standing at the base of the steps as Mike and Bill try to open a French door to the left of the main door. It won't open either. Then they try the other French door on the right-hand side and it pops right open. They try to motion for me to come up to the now open door, but I don't move. I just shake my head. They both come walking down the steps telling me I have to go in with them, and that it will be cool and some other bullshit. I say I need to go home, and turn around to pick up my bike. Right as I turn around, Bill grabs my right arm with his right hand hard. I snap my head around to see Mike coming around in front of me. I try to pull my arm free, but Mike grabs my left arm. I start pulling away from Mike, but then Bill grabs my left arm with his left hand. I'm screaming at this point as Bill has both my arms just above my elbows. Mike starts to go for my feet, but I start kicking. I pull back so my weight is supported by Bill, who has both my arms and is trying to drag me, and I kick Mike with both my feet right in his nose and he drops, shrieking. I then start trying to stomp Bill's feet and headbutt him with the back of my head. I manage to get my left arm free and start twisting my entire body around until my right arm pops loose from his grip. I instantly kicked him in the balls as hard as I could. Mike is up now. Bill is kind of on one knee and reaching for me. I shove Mike as hard as I can and reach for my bike. Mike is coming towards me. I still have the basketball wedged in the frame of my bike from earlier, and I throw it at him. It hits him in the hand he has covering his now bleeding nose, and it stops him for a second. I take off. I don't look back at all. I just pedaled as hard and fast as I could straight back to my house. From the door of the D of A to my house was maybe 1,000 yards, so it wasn't too far. The garage door is open and my dad is inside. I ride right inside with a huge sense of relief, but I'm shaking. My dad is behind his workbench and says hello, but he's preoccupied with whatever he's doing, so he doesn't notice that I'm pretty much freaking out. I stare out of the garage door, waiting to see if either of those guys are coming, but they never do. I looked back at my dad as I tried to calm down a bit. He's running a table saw, so he never really gives me another look. I go inside the house and nobody else is home, so I head straight to my room and kind of huff and puff for quite a while before I start to feel somewhat normal again as my heart finally slows down. I think it was part embarrassment and part me not really understanding what exactly had happened that kept me from saying anything. I never told anyone in my family or any of my friends about it. I honestly don't remember dwelling on it at all much after that. Just as I was about to graduate high school, about 6 years after all that went down, I had an assignment to write about the history of my hometown. While I was researching that paper, one of the things I looked into was the Daughters of America home. I not only looked into the history of the organization, racist and creepy, but I obviously wanted to know about the specific building in my town that had terrified me since forever. Around that time, someone had bought the property and they were in the process of building condos and turning it into a par 3 golf course. There were lots of recent newspaper articles about the new development, and so I just started working my way back in time from the present, finding everything I could about the place. Then I found a newspaper article that was about 6 years old and almost shit my pants. 3 guys had been arrested for squatting on the property about 6 months after my whole ordeal. The pictures were right there. Mike, Bill, and a third person I didn't recognize. That may have been the voice I heard from inside that house that day. They had kidnapped a mentally handicapped boy and were keeping him there too. There was, and still is, a large state mental hospital in my town, and apparently one of them worked there and just disappeared this kid. The article didn't go into much detail that I remember, but it mentioned that they had apparently been in the building possibly for years before this. Mike was actually 22 at the time. Bill was 45. The third guy was somewhere in his 50s, I think.